Cool. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us for our July Lunch and Learn for WiscWeb. I am Jenna Klinner, and I am the service coordinator for the WiscWeb team. I'm joined here today by Matt Goins, who did have to run at the beginning of this meeting, but will be back, I think, as well as various WiscWeb team members, including our developers. And we do have two members of the university marketing team here today for our narrowed width discussion. So here is the agenda for the session. We're going to talk through the results of the narrowed width survey. We're going to give you an update on Twitter embeds and do a really brief touch on meta threads. We're going to do a demo of a block feature for UW events. We're going to update you on a couple of reminders, including an update on launch requests for the fall semester start, setting primary admins for sites, removing old users, and a WiscWeb survey that is coming soon. And we will also end with a hopefully fun fiscal year 24 strategy planning activity with the WiscWeb team, where you can help impact our roadmap for this next fiscal year. I'll just mention too, just going back to this one, that activity will not require anyone to be on camera, so don't worry about having to unmute or turn on your cameras for the activity. I know that that can be very jarring for some folks when they're not anticipating having to do that. So the activity is just going to be a mural activity where we kind of asynchronously work on some things in the mural, and it's off cam. All right, so first up is our narrowed width discussion, and I'd like to thank everyone who responded to the survey that we sent out. I know that surveying can be a little bit annoying, but I can confidently say that this sort of quantitative info is really helpful for our team. So thank you for hanging in there with us as we attempted to learn more about your needs and preferences. So here's a really quick overview of the survey. The feedback on the survey was a bit different than the feedback that we got in the last Lunch and Learn. So I'll share a little bit more about that in the next few slides. Nearly 50% of respondents felt at least a little bit uncomfortable with the proposed change, and about 20% of respondents were really excited about the change. So obviously we have some really interesting data to assess. All right, in our June Lunch and Learn, we did a poll for how users were feeling about the proposed change, and we asked users to make a mark on the line to indicate how they were feeling. So this graphic kind of shows that line. On the left, it was, mark if you hated it, in the middle, indifferent, and to the right, if you loved it. The closer you got to the left, like I said, it means you disliked them, and then closer to the right indicated you liked it. The results of this poll were mostly positive. You could see a lot of the markings were more towards the love section or indifferent. There was only one mark that kind of appeared to the left. Alternatively, in the survey, users responded that they were mostly uncomfortable with the change. And as you can see here, most answered somewhat uncomfortable, and some answered extremely uncomfortable. And only a few users here were indifferent. And then for those that were more positive about the change, they were overwhelmingly comfortable, but this still didn't outweigh those that were having some concerns. Since these two results really differed, we reflected upon why we might have seen such a difference between the responses in the poll versus the responses in the survey. So first, this is likely related to visibility. The poll was very public. We opened it during a Zoom meeting. Usernames were kind of shown next to cursors. The survey, alternatively, was anonymous. Second, the audience felt a little bit different. So the Lunch and Learn tends to fill up with very active users. Meanwhile, the survey went out to everyone. So that could be people who are, not participating as frequently in our Lunch and Learns. And third, the time that you got to respond was different. So the Lunch and Learn required a very prompt response, obviously, and the survey allowed a little bit more reflection time. All right, so the survey asked about comfort levels with this change, but it also allowed users to provide feedback on their concerns and questions. So the first area I'm going to just cover here is concerns. So in regards to concerns, we saw several themes. Several users had concerns around how this change would make pages longer. Some noted that this would require them to reformat their content. A couple users asked for this to be made into an optional feature rather than a required feature or mandatory update. Some offered preferences for how H1 headings were displayed, either left aligned or centered. Some noted that they were concerned that this change might make content look a little zigzag down the page, because you'd have like a narrow one column and then two column would be wider and then maybe another one column. And finally, there were a few users who had concerns that how this change would impact image sizes. As a side note, we did have several positive comments in our concern section as well. There weren't a ton of themes there though, so I'm not going to share those. They were just overall excited about the change. We received less questions than we did concerns, but I did see two themes there. One was that users asked if we could make this an option rather than a mandatory update or required change. And then second, users wondered about which content types and page elements would be impacted. So based on the feedback that we received, we have made a couple of decisions that we wish to share with you today, as well as some next steps. So we have opted to add an option to the UW theme that allows groups to set narrowed width for one column layouts. This would apply to all one column layouts across your site, but only certain page elements would be impacted. If groups wish to set this at the page element level rather than at the site level, they can use content layout classes that we shared last time, and we can share out that KB doc again shortly, but you would be able to still use those features. And then with help from university marketing, we, meaning WiscWeb, will document how to set the narrowed width at the site level. So we'll be creating that documentation when this feature is ready. And that will include a description of which page elements will be impacted. So that was a question from the survey, and we'll make sure to document those with that overarching documentation. And then for next steps, the UW theme developers will be working on actually building out and coding this enhancement. The option will roll out with a future UW theme release, and we will email out an update to users when this feature is available. So I just want to thank you again for your excellent feedback and notes about this feature. Your perspective was super valuable for us. All right. So I mentioned earlier, we're going to do a brief touch on Twitter. We did email out about this the other day, so you should have gotten some notes, but just as a recap of what we've learned, on July 3rd, embedded Twitter feeds stopped working, and it stopped for all web users, not just WiscWeb users. We believe this is related to Twitter's recent change, which requires users to log in to view tweets. So what you might see if you have an embed for Twitter is it says something like no tweets to show. And it's because publicly you can't see those unless you're logged in. Unfortunately, we don't have any way to impact this at this time. This was a decision made by Twitter, and we are at their mercy here. So if you have a Twitter feed embedded in your site, we are recommending you remove it for now to limit confusion for your users. And then if they decide to make changes in the future, you can always add it back in. And as we learn more about this, we will email, post, and give updates at future Lunch and Learn sessions to keep you posted on what we know. And then really briefly, at this time, we don't support meta threads. Much is in the air at this time. We hope to follow that progress on both Twitter and the threads topics over the coming months. It sounds like a lawsuit may have been discussed on behalf of Twitter, which could impact the future of threads as a social network. We've also been made aware that due to quick turnaround, Threads is lacking certain necessary accessibility components like alt text. Our position currently is that we hope for the dust to settle a little bit before making decisions on things like embeds or social icons. That said, we'd love to hear if your group is planning on using Threads in any way, so feel free to call out in the chat if that's a tool that you're going to be utilizing. And I will say WordPress is also not accommodating it at this time. All right, so we went through the narrowed width discussion and we talked about Twitter briefly. I just wanted to stop here for a little bit to go through any questions that you all might have about those two topics.
I just have a point of clarification for the embeds. I think we've talked about this before, but I believe Threads does not currently even have an option to embed stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're choosing not to support it, it's that they don't offer that at this time.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Thank you, Scott. I did look in the chat. I didn't see anything, but feel free to post if you've got anything. Would narrow width be controlled by the designer or the user? So please correct me if I'm wrong, university marketing team, but my understanding is that we would be setting a standard pixel width that we recommend based on kind of like readability and accessibility standards, and that would be set site-wide in the customizer if you choose to use this option. However, there will still be the option to use the little custom class that we featured last time, where you can set it at the page level, or sorry, content layout level. Does that sound correct, Danielle and Nick?
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Jenna.
Yeah. Rich, does that answer your question?
It does. I was just
Okay.
wondering if this could be a feature that a user, from an accessibility standpoint, just like someone that would need a screen reader, could say, I want narrow width. But
you know,
it's
that is
fine that it wouldn't be.
interesting. No, this would be like a site-wide setting in the back end. So it wouldn't be something they could adjust on the front end. But good question. Any other questions about narrowed width or Twitter? All right, and it looks like we don't have Matt yet back yet. Is that correct, Matt? Give him a chance to answer if he's here. Okay, don't believe he's here. So I will do my best to walk through the piece that he was going to walk through today. One quick sec as I add this in here. All right, so the next topic, oh, sorry, just saw a question. The user could narrow their screen, would that help? Oh, sorry. So Linda's commenting on how they could narrow their browser screen to help with the question that Rich had. Potentially, yes, that I think that could help. Sorry. There we go. All right. So switching over, we are demoing a new feature that we're building for the UW Events plugin. It's called Events Cards, and this was based on a feature request that we had from a user that was asking for more display options for the content. And so Event Cards allows you to display your events in nice little cards, which is kind of cute, just kind of like the feature content blocks. So here is the example. Here's like a one column of events with drop shadow and UW box applied. You can see that like in this case, there's an image added and the excerpt is shown. And then your more events shows up below there. Here's an example of the one column list cards with no excerpts. And then here it is shown in like a, I think this is just a 2-column layout with a normal events list in the first column. And then in the second column, there's a 2-column layout for your, or is this a 3-column, Andrea?
Yes, that's a 3-column layout.
Oh, my apologies. Okay.
No worries.
This is a 3-column layout. The only reason I wondered is because I know that there's options where you can display it in more than one column right from the back end of the page element, but that makes more sense. So this is a 3-column layout, events list in the first column, event card drop shadow in the second column, and event card UW card style in the third column. And then we've got 2-column events 50-50 here to show what that looks like. These do not have excerpts shown. And then 1 column, only 2 events shown. So kind of a nice little feature here. This is not added yet. We really wanted some user feedback on this one before we push this out. So I'm going to go into the back end of the page. If it lets me here. Whoops. One sec. All right. So In the back end of the page, you can see that these are the different styles that we added, and they are showing up here as style as featured content blocks with a checkbox that says check this box to style each event like a featured content block, and then the apply drop shadow and apply card style are right here. So what we're wondering kind of is like, do you have any feedback on that language? Does that make sense to you as a user? Is this where you would look for those styling changes? So just feel free to either unmute or pop your thoughts in the chat if you have any there. I'm seeing a lot of positive chats about this feature. Thank you very much for all those comments. There is a question from Linda. Are these automated at all? Will the card just disappear after the event is over? And Andrea did note, yes, this will only show for upcoming events, which is really nice. Kimberly asks, wondering if you're working on an add to calendar link and separately a calendar view. So I think I'll talk about the calendar view really quick. And then we can talk about the add to calendar. So the calendar view, I think we've talked about this a couple times now, is not a feature we will be adding to UW events ever. It is high complexity for development over time. There's a lot that would have to go into that in terms of making that mobile friendly and making that visually work. So there's not going to be a calendar view ever added to UW events. But in terms of the add to calendar links, I believe that there is a feature request out there for that. So you could look and upvote that feature. If there's not, you can add that one. Let's see. So Linda notes that, yes, this is where I would look for those options. You like the design. Thank you. Anyone have any feedback about the language? So Paige asks, is there a way to hide the event image? Paige, are you asking about like maybe displaying images for some events and not others?
I think I can answer this one actually. So
Yeah, go ahead.
the image that's showing up is just the featured image on the event. So there isn't a way to hide it at this point. If you have a featured image for the event, it will appear on the card.
Excellent.
I can explain really quick. So how we use the old events calendar plugin is on certain pages. We would have a page for like a different event series. And if there was an upcoming event, we would feature that as like a single listing. Like we have a big public event coming up. Here's the speaker. And then it would have that kind of card. So we only displayed one and we kind of used the full width, kind of like a background as the image, or had the image in a separate, because it was the full width. So just wondering if there was an option this seems like a great way to kind of mimic that, but just if there's a way to hide that image, because if I want a full width thing and I do a full width featured content block, that's going to be huge on a desktop display, probably.
Do all of your events have featured images?
They will, yeah. So yeah, the public ones like this. So
I think that would be something where we'd want to capture the use case page.
Sure.
So another good example of maybe like a feature request there. Thank you to Sheena. So Sheena provided the link to the KB doc, actually to the Get board for submitting a feature request. If someone from the WiscWeb team could grab the KB doc for submitting a feature request, just so that users who are new to that process have that documentation and throw that into the thread there, that would be great. Linda says it seems like we'll want a uniform size for these images so that they can look consistent.
Right now, they're displaying the UW 2x3 size. So even if you upload a portrait size image, for example, it will be cropped to the 2x3 size. That's a good note.
It looks like Matt was able to add the KB doc as well for instructions on how to add a new feature. So if you're not familiar with the process, I highly recommend going to that KB doc for instructions on how to log in properly, and then ensuring that you have all the components of the feature request that we request there. Any other questions? What would happen? So Claire asked, what would happen if this is a recurring event or we do not use those anymore? It's been a while since I entered one. So recurring events are not a feature of the UW events plugin. So that would not be something that is possible in the new plugin. What you'd want to do likely if you did have some sort of recurring event is break that out from UW events in some way and have that be just like a standard text block that describes the event when it is. Or if it's something that's not recurring, like, oh, it happens every single Thursday or something. If it's just like repeating, 3 times, what you could do is create the first event and then duplicate that and just change the date for each one. When Adrienne asked, when do you think this functionality will go live? So I think we were just looking for this feedback on does the text, descriptive text make sense on how to add the feature? And then we're pretty much ready to push this out. We just have to get some documentation in place. So I would imagine sometime in the next couple weeks, you should be able to see this. Other questions, comments? Okay, if you do have questions, comments, please feel free to continue adding them to the chat. I'm going to move on to, oh, let's see. Yes, Linda, I can show you again. So I'm going to switch over to this view. I'll show you one of the ones. This has the drop shadow and the box style added and an excerpt. So that's a nice little display option. You can see if you don't have an image, what it'll look like here. Thank you to Andrea. Andrea did dump the URL for this page into the chat too, if you want to do a little bit of discovery on your own time, just kind of looking at how this displays, what it'll look like, get ideas for how you might use it. All right, and also snaps for Andrea for this feature, super great option. Adrian asked, Jenna, do the blocks also display in chronological order? I believe they're only displaying, or do we have to be mindful of how to post?
No, it's similar to the list. I guess, Jenna, if you scroll up a little bit, I think there's an example of the list. Let's see, where is it? Oh, sorry,
I
it's
think
scrolling
it's down.
Yep.
Sorry for the scrolling. There we go.
So really,
it's
it's the same information that displays in the list view, but we style them as cards. So if you've chosen to only display a category, it will only display those categories. So it's chronological. From now forward.
Cool. All right, for time, I'm going to move on just because we do have limited time here. And I am going to bring back, let's see. I'm trying to think of all the different, you might have to remind me, Matt, if I miss any, all the different reminders that we had. So we had a couple different reminders before we want to do our mural activity. So one was if you are planning to launch your site and want it to go live before fall semester start, you need to get your launch request in by August 24th. So I'll put this in the chat.
Sorry, I missed. Did you also do the update on the Twitter threads thing?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I also wanted to note, we have a new feature. We talked about it previously, but I'm just reminding folks, we do have a feature where you can set your primary admin on your site. I will show you really quickly where you can find that. So if you go to users, you can edit any user here. And you can change their role to primary administrator. And then you'll have to click save at the bottom. That is vitally important for our team. So please, 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 if you do not have a primary admin set on your site, please set one, because anytime we need to reach out about the site, it's so helpful to know who's the real person making decisions. A great example is we're currently working through our events calendar migration, and I'm having to contact users for that process. And I'm just sending it to all administrators when I don't see a primary admin. And that's a lot of people potentially to send that to. And maybe some of them aren't the ones that make decisions about the site. Maybe they were added at one time to do one simple thing. So wherever possible, if you could designate a primary admin, that's so helpful to us. I'll show you really quick where that shows up too in the dashboard. Right here, there's like a block now, and you can see on this site, this is a dev site, but we've designated Matt's user account as the primary admin here, and then your administrators will be listed. I think it shows 5, and then if there's more than 5, you can click here to see all of them. But it is a nice just option. We can click into the dashboard now and see who is the contact. Also a reminder, as I'm going through and contacting folks about events calendar, I'm getting a lot of emails back saying, I don't work for this group anymore, or I left campus, or I no longer have anything to do with the website. Please, if you can, update your user list. So take a moment to go through and just remove people who no longer need access to your site. You can just hover and remove here. So go to users, hover over the username and click remove. Cleaning that up is so helpful for both us and for you in the long term. And it's just a reminder we wanted to throw out there. And then the last reminder, I believe, is just that we are working on a WiscWeb survey. I know I just said the surveys are annoying, and I apologize in advance. We just want to make sure that we're checking in with you all on, pain points with the service, or things you liked about, things that we changed over the last year, things like that. So we will be sending out a WiscWeb specific survey soon, where we're hoping to get your feedback and continue making changes based on that feedback. Just got a comment in the chat there from Linda. I'm thinking out loud, is there a way to highlight the idea that this is not a typical feature box, but rather an event? Maybe put the date in red. I'm not sure how to do it, just wanted to throw that out there. Just going back here.
So differentiating it from the usual feature
I think
content blocks.
I think the differentiator would be the heading there, Linda. So making sure that your heading designates that this is an events list would be a great way. I could also see if you do include the excerpt, that's a great way of indicating that it is an event, because it's kind of a description of the event. I don't know if there's any comments from the devs there, but that's my initial thought.
Yeah. And that just might be content strategy as well. Like be cognizant of where you're using these things, and just different decisions might have to be made with how you're going to lay out that content and where you're going to put it.
Yeah. All right, so again, for time, please feel free to keep adding your questions to the chat here, but I'm going to switch over to our final agenda item today, which is an activity that I hope you find fun. We're certainly going to find super valuable. Yeah, and Phil puts in here, breakout trigger warning, just a mural. So I did mention this earlier. This is not screen time where you have to turn on your camera. You do not even need to unmute. We are not doing any kind of breakout rooms. This is simply something in what we call Mural. It's a tool that we use a lot on our team. And you can be entirely anonymous with this as well, so you won't see your name here. So I'm going to copy this link here and throw that in the chat. Let me know if you're not able to get in. I would recommend, if you do have a Mural account and might be logged into it, open that in an incognito window so that you do come in as an anonymous sort of player. And then the first thing I'm going to want you to do is, towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little box and it has like a smiley face here. I'm hovering over my cursor where it is. And you can hover over your little creature and say, uncheck broadcast my cursor and uncheck show cursors. That just helps with a lot of the action of the cursors going on here. So again, towards the bottom here, you have a little icon. Hover over that and uncheck broadcast my cursor and check show cursors.
Yeah, I mean, of the two of those, show cursors is most poignant to you, the individual, because that way, if you uncheck show cursors, it will clear up the clutter of everybody else's cursor going on there. Broadcast my cursor is just more friendly.
Also, Jenna, at the beginning of the meeting, you might have said this. Do you want me to stop the recording now?
Yeah, go ahead and
Oh,
stop the
yes.
recording. It's just hard for us to
It's, yeah.
share all
To
this
rec-
in the